Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is David and today we have the reader evolution tag. Or evolution of a reader tag, whatever the phrasing of it is. This is an original tag by Jack from Spread Book Joy. And it's a short tag. Just a couple of questions and some really good thoughtful questions that have got me thinking of additional follow-up questions that wouldn't want to kill the life of this tag by trying to interject or do something parallel to it. But if those questions stick in a couple months, maybe. So question 1, what do you read? How has your reading taste evolved over time? And the biggest thing that stands out for me on this is growing up, I considered myself to be a science fiction and fantasy reader. And of that, I would say probably 96% of that was fantasy, and maybe 4% of that was science fiction. Like, it was a very, very lopsided ratio there. And I always thought that I didn't enjoy science fiction, apart from, like, in film, TV shows, Star Wars. I obsessed with Star Wars growing up. Star Wars books were most of that 4% that I was reading of science fiction. And now it's changed. I got older, and when I was working towards my master's, I fell into medieval literature and fell in love with it. Like, absolutely love medieval literature, especially like epic poetry, Beowulf, Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, things of that nature. Chaucer, and even up to Shakespeare. Shakespeare wouldn't be considered medieval, but he's close enough. I mean, if Chaucer is the end of it, it's a very small leap from Chaucer to Shakespeare. And, from Shakespeare, another short hop to Edmund Spenser. And that's probably where I would draw the line of what I would consider to be where my really, really strong medieval-ish experiences lie, where I'm excited about and enjoy diving into. That led me along paths of, Arthurian literature. I've loved King Arthur all my life. Got into the Viking sagas quite a bit and really, really enjoyed those. And then from there, in this past year, which just kind of steals a little bit of the thunder from the last question, but in the last year, I have found that I think my favorite genre now, definitively, I could say, is science fiction, which was all of my life the genre that I ignored the most. And now I'm finding so many rich ideas and concepts and ways of encountering things that just delight me. And there's different degrees of science fiction, and you've got those writers like Ray Bradbury and Harlan Ellison, who did a lot of short fiction, to where the science wasn't what was driving the story. It was the story itself, the ideas in that story being told. The science was just the backdrop, the futurism, the space. All of those things were just the paint on the wall, so to speak. But that's not what you were there for. You're there for what's being told. And writers like that, and then finding authors like Joe Haldeman and Dan Simmons, and Alfred Bester, and authors like that, Isaac Asimov, of course, that have reeled me in on the other side of science fiction, where it's the great stories being told alongside some of those more detailed science taking place in there. And there's so much that I have not encountered yet that I'm excited to do so, because it all feels so fresh to me. And that's really the problem I've run into with fantasy, I think, is so much of it feels like I've been there and seen that at times. Earlier this year, I read The Dragonbone Chair by Ted Williams, and it was just a miserable time going through it because it felt like it was one of 800 other generic fantasies of opening an 800-page epic fantasy that you don't grow to care about that character for most of that book. Because he's starting out as a little boy and he's got to fumble and bumble his way and find somebody that's going to teach him a little bit, and then he's got to get swept onto this quest, and then, you know, fate of the kingdom is relying on him to do stuff. And then it was a tough one, and it surprised me because I know a lot of people really enjoyed it, and going through that really exposed to me how much the genre of fantasy as a whole, I think, has gotten, stale's the wrong word, but I need to probably diversify my reading taste in fantasy and go into ones that take a little bit more unusual approach. I still need to get around to A Hero Born by Jin Young, which is the first book of the Legend of the Condor series or something like that, which is supposed to be really, really good. And because it's not by an American or a British fantasy author, I believe he's Japanese, I'm expecting it to be just absolutely refreshing. Anyway, question 2. I can already tell this is going to be a rambly one. How do you read? Has the format changed? How has the format changed in the methods in which you read? And it hasn't changed a whole lot. I've come full circle because I started reading physical books because it was before ebooks and before I knew what audiobooks were. And 10, 12 years ago, when Barnes & Noble first pushed out the Nooks, I fell hard into e-reading, thought I was going to be on board for this new wave, and started to get fatigued with it because of issues like formatting being inconsistent and the lack of ease in which to flip to maps, to footnotes, to endnotes, and the pricing model. And so I've come back full circle to reading physical books almost exclusively. I'm starting to read a few more ebooks in recent weeks. And then, of course, I have commute every day, half an hour each way to work. That's, a lot of drive time. It adds up each week. That's 5 hours, roughly, of my day that I get back, in a way, by primarily listening to audiobooks. And in general, I enjoy it. And, the narrator makes or breaks the experience. There are audiobooks where I have to stop a couple hours in and say, I can't do this narrator. I'll just have to read this one physically at some point in time. And there are others where it's a wonderful experience, and then you find that narrator and you look at what else they've done. And I've gotten through, it's how I got through the Wheel of Time series years ago. I listened to it all on audiobook while talking to a friend about it. I wouldn't have gotten through the entire series any other way. It's how I've done all the Cosmere books so far. Or not the Cosmere, but the Stormlight Archive books so far. The ones that are just so long that they take such a big time commitment. Who cares if it takes me a month and a half to listen to it on audiobook? Then I'm still free to read whatever else in the meantime. So that's how my format's changed. I've gone full circle. So how much do you read? Do you read more or less than before? I'm reading. There was a season in my life for about 5 years, 6 years, that coincides roughly with two things. The birth of our first child and my developing a passion for playing board games because of the interactivity. I craved doing something that was not passive with my spouse. So instead of sitting down and turning on Netflix and watching a show and binge watching, 3 episodes of a show at night, I'd much rather sit down and set up and play a board game where we're engaged, we're talking to each other, we're using our brains, and thinking critically through things. And that's far more enjoyable. And when I fall into something, I tend to fall hard. So as that continued to take more and more and more of my free time, obviously reading took less and less and less. I would still read, but it got to a point where I was maybe finishing a dozen books at most over the course of a year. Audiobooks excluded. And there wasn't anything wrong with that. But now I'm back to reading about that level where I'm reading at least each day, which is the next question is, when do you read and how often do you read? I read pretty much every day. I won't say that I always read every day, because I'm sure there are days where I don't. But I try to. And there are 3 times primarily when I can carve out at least a couple pages most days. And that's my morning. And the morning depends heavily upon my daughter. Her sleep patterns are very, very inconsistent. So some days she might sleep all night until about noon the next day. And other days she might sleep from about midnight till 2:30 in the morning. Now, thankfully, 5 nights a week we have a nurse that's here that takes care of her during the night. But if I wake up at 5:45, 6 in the morning when the nurse is getting ready to leave, if my daughter's up, I'm there with her. I'm engaged. I'm talking to her, playing with her, singing with her. But if she's sleeping, I am reading at least a little bit before I start getting ready for the morning. The next time that I read is most of the time during my lunch. During the week, I get an hour lunch break. And the past 2 months, most of that time has been spent grading because I'm currently teaching 3 online classes. So that's why you saw a decline in the number of videos I was making, because I just didn't have time to read and to make videos. And now that 2 of those are winding down, and it looks like so far only 1 is going to kick back up early December, I'll be having more time back to where I can balance that a little bit more. And so then I'll hopefully be able to get back to where at least half of that lunch hour can be spent reading. And then the other time is before bed, which is what I'm going to be doing as soon as I'm done with this video. I'm going to turn off my electronics. I'm going to go sit in that nice comfortable chair right there. And I'm going to read a little bit more of Swords and Deviltry, which I thought I'd be done with by now because it's 150 pages. I'm on page 96 out of 152. It's going along slowly. It's a little slower read. The pages, this is more of a trade paperback size, so there's a little bit more on them. And, I'm enjoying the experience of going through it. It's not a race. In spite of that 500 book challenge, it's not a race. And, I'm excited to get back into it, at least get another 15 or 20 pages knocked out before bed tonight. And then the last question here is, how has Booktube changed your reading habits? How has it changed your reading? And part of that answer I mentioned earlier is I fell hard into science fiction because of Space Opera September. Back a little over a year ago, when I was just all excited to join each and every readathon and event that I could find that sounded interesting and would overbook myself. That was one of the few events that stands out as a real turning point for me as a reader, in finding that I really do enjoy science fiction. And from there, it led me to find channels I really enjoy. Michael from Fit to Be Read, Kristen from Krisnell SFF Reader, Rachel from RK Stumbling Bear. I think I found all of those around that same time because I was exploring more science fiction. And those two ladies, I did buddy reads with both of them that month and absolutely enjoyed it. And between that and Michael K. Vaughan and his influences, I've discovered I really enjoy science fiction to the point where I think it's my favorite genre. And that blows me away still. I still can't believe it. And who knows, at some point in time it might start to become repetitive and stale. But there's so much out there I still haven't read. So many of the greats that I still haven't read. I don't think I've picked up a book by Arthur C. Clarke yet. And he's one of those greats. For Joe Haldeman, I've only read his Forever trilogy. I've only read Star's My Destination by Alfred Bester. There's so much unexplored territory, and that's not even considering all the short stories. I'm excited because Dangerous Visions December is going to be starting November 26th. That's coming up right around the corner. And I'll be starting to read Dangerous Visions, one piece of it a day. That reminds me, I need to make a video tomorrow night to kind of put in writing that reading schedule for that. And to let people have my Voxer again to join us. We've got a group of us that are on Voxer that are going to be reading it and talking about the stories as we read them. I think it'll be very, very fun, very exciting. And if it goes well, I've got, again, Dangerous Visions 1 and again, Dangerous Visions 2 sitting on my shelf, ready to roll right into January and February. It's also made it so that I'm having more fun reading now than I ever have because I'm talking about it. I'm able to interact with people that actually know. Like, my wife has never said, don't talk to me about your books, but there's only so much she can interact with if she hasn't read the book. And, our reading tastes are pretty different because she likes to read more of the young adult area of fantasy, which there's nothing wrong with that. I've discovered other things that I would rather read with my time right now. And so it's been really, really fun and interesting to see how it shaped things because reading has become a priority again, and I'm finding ways to carve out that little bit of extra time to read even when my back is against the wall and there's just feels like no time. I'm doing a lot less mindless scrolling through things and checking random news articles and Facebook posts, and I've gotten completely off of all social media except for I still have a Facebook because it's how I stay in touch with a couple of the board game things that are going on locally. If I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't have Facebook either. I'm on it for maybe 5 minutes a day at that. And it feels good to have that time back. Even without spending it on books, it's changed some of those habits to where I've got that time back for myself. And then last but not least, we will tag some people. And so I was doing some thinking on this earlier today. I didn't check everybody that I normally would check, but it seems like a lot of people have done this tag. But as of this morning, I don't think Steve Donahue has done this tag. So Steve, if you haven't done this tag, you're tagged. I don't know why you wouldn't have done this already. But you're definitely tagged for this. And one that I just encountered last night, a new channel, a newer channel, Crybaby Films, and it'll be spelled uniquely down below, KRYB4BY Films. And I found her channel because she left a comment letting me know she's in on the 500 book challenge because of Michael K. Vaughan. And so, of course, I went, I gave her video a watch, I subscribed, left her a comment, and told her if she decides to try to figure out how to do Voxer, she can join the rest of us that are doing this 500 book challenge on there, because we've got a little group there where we're going to bolster the troops, keep the morale high as we're going through this insanity together. So there you have it. This is longer than it probably should have been for 4 questions, but I get in a mood and I just start chatting. And that's what I love about this, about the way I do Booktube, is because it's chatty. I turn it on and I just go. And, I wouldn't want it any other way. I love that it feels like having a conversation with friends. And that's what this is all about, right? Having a conversation with friends, getting to know people and thinking of them as friends. That's why I immediately jumped on when Michael said he was doing this 500 book challenge, even before I knew that it was serious. And I said, if you're doing this, I'm in. I will do this with you. Because I didn't want him to do it alone. And that stands. I wouldn't want him to do it alone. I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. So, there we go. I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I will probably, hopefully, talk to you tomorrow about Dangerous Visions December.